All right, we're starting a new book, Job, which is exciting. Um, not to say I didn't like the previous books, but I think there's quite a bit to dig into in Job, a lot of good lessons to learn. So it's kind of a unique book because there's still some debate. Basically, people's projection could be it was written anywhere in the Old Testament. uh, so many, I would say, even potentially a majority, by my just complete thumbnail glancing at things, seem to think it's pretty old. Like basically the time of Moses, when Moses was writing the Pentateuch, Job could have been, same time or just after. Um, there's a reasonable amount, I think, that sort of believe it could have been in the Solomon reign, but there isn't an exact, hey, there's no sort of real defining characteristics in terms of it mentions this king or that king or something else. And there's no solid evidence as to exactly when it moved into the Hebrew Bible. So it could sort of be anywhere along there, but seems to be a fairly old book as you read through it, sort of a very patriarchal sort of period, which is that older sort of Moses time frame, I think, is why most people sort of lean there, but there is no exact answer. But starts off with a man of complete integrity, Job. And I'm just going to change. So I got my pointer. There you go. Who feared God, turned away from evil. 7 sons, 3 daughters. Um, and even this first paragraph, this is sort of the problem with going through a couple of chapters at a time, is you could do a whole message on this paragraph. It's used often because um, Job was really sort of acting as a priest. So he's saying basically the family would get together, and whenever this get together was over, Job would send for his children and purify them, rising early in the morning to offer burnt offerings for all of them. So he was acting sort of as a priest, which is one of the reasons most people would sort of lean towards a very old time because it was sort of the pre a widespread priestly sort of religion where he would have gone into the community, found whatever the tabernacle or temple or something and expected it. So that's probably the most key piece, I guess, of trying to date it. It seems fairly old because he was kind of acting as priest, offering burnt offerings for his children. But it's also a situation where he says, "For Job thought, perhaps my children have sinned, having cursed God in their hearts." So he was offering offerings for their forgiveness. Um, and people often use this as a good example of taking responsibility for your family. So I was just listening to a pastor who says that whenever he has counseling with a Christian family, often marriage counseling, but it's based on your whole family, is he explains to the husband, the father, that you have to take responsibility for all the actions of your family. So if you're having trouble in your marriage, you have to take responsibility for that. Um, that doesn't necessarily mean if you want to say fault, it's your fault or not. It doesn't really matter to a certain extent. We look at responsibility nowadays, modern thought of there's 20% here and 50% here and another 30% here of responsibility. But it's really more of a, it's like love, right? You don't have 20% love that you give to one kid and 20% love that you give to another kid and 20 if you've got 5 kids, right? You just love them. You know what I mean? There isn't a certain apportionment, and responsibility is the same way. So just because the father is responsible for his family doesn't take away the fact that if a child sins, they have responsibility for their actions as well. It actually increases it because the father is taking responsibility, then the son actually should feel more desire to take responsibility for his actions. Same is true, whatever, with a wife, with a daughter, with someone else. And this is a situation where Job is being righteous and saying, I'm trying to take responsibility for my family's actions because I am the father. And therefore, I have some of that responsibility. So, like I said, you can go into a lot there and just ponder on that piece. But we will continue on because Satan arrives, right? One day, the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. This is an interesting passage, phrase. Um, and it is because I'm looking at my notes in it to see what it says in my Bible. It doesn't actually have the say, which is weird because I have the I have the same version that I'm putting up here, but I don't have this little footnote on God. The sons of God is a phrase that comes up a number of times. And depends on who you believe. Some people believe that it can be used for noble people, but this is one of the clear instances where that doesn't make any sense, right? It's not just the leaders or the people of God or whatever it is. There isn't any situation where these are humans, right? This phrase, sons of gods, um, it's basically the Elohim, which is sort of the uh, small letter version of God that's in Genesis 1. So uh, most people sort of think of angels and whatever, but there is a distinct. This is good evidence for the divine council idea, and there is a number of situations in the Bible where uh, God seems to have a group of angels in particular. That angels, spirit people, that could be called the divine council that he chats with and works with and whatever. So they came and presented themselves before the Lord, and Satan came with them, right? So this is a situation where God is sort of sitting down with some of the heavenly beings, whether you want to call them the divine council or not. It's clearly an evidence of this is what he's doing. He's sitting down with them and having a chat. I will mention some of the other ones as we come through them, but there's a number of these examples. And the Lord says, where have you been? Well, roaming through the earth, Satan answered, walking around on it. So this is actually a fairly important piece of evidence. We talk about how Satan is sort of the king of this world or whatever. And this is a situation where, God is talking to him. Clearly, they are independent beings. There isn't a necessarily God controls every one of his actions. He seems to have some agency, and he's roaming around the earth, causing mischief. And they get into a little bit of a contest about how great Job is. And Satan, of course, says, well, of course he's great. You've blessed him. And it's sort of a chicken or an egg. Is he great because he blessed him, or is he, because he blessed him, he's great? So Satan says that, oh, because he's blessed, he is a good man of God. And God is saying, no, no, no. He has been blessed because he's a good man of God. So Satan takes away everything. As the messengers come in, they keep telling him all of his belongings have been destroyed, and eventually, even all of his children are struck down. So, Job stood up, tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground, and worshipped, saying, so, tore his robe and shaved his head is a normal thing. Put ashes on yourself is another one that comes up quite a bit. They may put on sacks or rough linen as cloth. Those are all signs of mourning, right? So he is mourning. He tore his robe. He shaved his head. Clearly, he's in a mourning situation, but he fell to the ground and worshiped, saying, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave this life. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's just fascinating. And throughout all this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. So every belonging he had and his children all wiped away. And naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave it. The Lord gives and takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's just an amazing sort of refrain, isn't it? You hope that you would be in that situation. So I have I have been in the situation where you lose your things. Those of you that know me, which is really, honestly, it wasn't that bad. It's inconvenient, yes, but I was happy to say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord," because my family was all safe. Can you imagine being in the situation where you lost all of your family as well? That must be devastating. And so, an amazing response from Job right there. But even more, we get to chapter 2, and the sons of God came again, and Satan was there from roaming the earth and walking around, right? And basically Satan says, well, yes, but he still has his health, right? If he loses that, then I'm sure he will curse your name, right? So God allows this, and Satan goes through. So this is sort of at the crux of Job is you don't know why you are facing these situations, right? We're in a fallen world. So people are allowed to sin, they're allowed to do evil things. Satan is trying to corrupt it even more so. right? So what if somebody chooses to, run a factory back in the 20s that pours some sort of chemical that causes cancer into some product or supply or whatever, and it ends up giving you cancer later, right? That's not your choice. That's not, necessarily an outcome. It's a choice of that person, right? So this hundreds of billions of these decisions being made by people in this fallen world over and over. So you can't pull out the ball of string and say, this person did this, this is the cause of this, right? Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes uh, God is aware of these situations and allows it to take place and or orchestrates it to take place for other reasons that we're just never going to understand, right? You're never able to know that whole picture. And that's one of the sort of pieces of Job is understanding, right? So you might say, why does God do this? Well, maybe on a simple answer, he did this so that he could write Job, and Job could be in the Bible for billions and billions of people throughout all of history and just learn lessons, right? Maybe that's why this was allowed to happen. Who knows why and how it all happened, right? But that's kind of the point of this is you can't just say, well, I had a bad thing happen and therefore it's that person's fault or this person's fault or God's fault. These are all such complicated situations that you just have to have faith that God will be with you through it, despite whatever situations, right? And this is Job's response, amazingly, again. So his wife, are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die, right? She's obviously pretty upset. So lost all the family, lost all their belongings, and now her husband is diseased, right? And great response by Job. You speak as a foolish woman speaks, right? Instead of showing empathy, showing we talked about this in a sermon a little while ago, right? But he's speaking truth. He's saying, look, should we accept only good from God and not adversity? Like, like we had all of these animals, we had all these kids, everything was wonderful, and we say, oh, that's great. That must be all from God. And then when bad things happen, we say, well, that's got nothing to do with God. Let's curse him, right? That's not really God, is it? Like you clearly don't have a concept of God. If you could only thank him when things are good and curse him when things are bad, then clearly you don't have any concept of God as a God, right? And throughout all of this, Job did not sin in what he said. So Job's three friends come. They hear about all that happened to him. They met together. They seem to be genuinely good friends. They don't necessarily give good advice, but they do. They want to come sympathize and comfort. When they come from a distance, they wept aloud. They threw dust in the air, etc. They sat on the ground for 7 days and nights waiting for Job to speak, right? Rather than coming in and trying to tell him something, whatever, they are willing to wait all that time for him to speak to them. And that's what he does. He comes out and he gives a pretty long opening speech. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but they waited for him. And what this speech tells you is, Job is mourning, like mourning to the point of why was I even born? How could I be born to have all of these things happen, all of this sadness and devastation in my life, right? The interesting thing to keep in mind as you go through all of this is Job did not sin. So even though he's at the point of questioning, why was I possibly born? Why could this have all happened? He was not sinning. What that tells you is it's not wrong to mourn. It's not wrong to be upset. Even to question how, why, as long as, like Job said, Job never questions that God is in charge, right? That's a clear through all of his things, right? You thank God in the good times, and you thank God in the bad times. And he clearly still has an appropriate fear and respect of God, even when he is saying, "Why has God done this to me? I don't know." Right? So there's a clear sort of distinction here that he still recognizes God is in charge, that he is faithful, acting as if God knows this, planned this, put it in place. I don't get it, right? That's what he's saying. He's like, I'm saying, I don't get it, God. I don't understand, but that's not necessarily sinful as long as you keep the fear and respect and understand. Like we can't understand the mind of God. That doesn't happen, right? It's just not going to happen. So this is what Job is getting at is I can be sad, I can mourn, I cannot get why God did this, but God did. He allowed it to happen. And I will still continue to fear God and obey him despite these difficult situations, which is pretty amazing. So we're going to go through a lot more with all of their advice and even some commentary from God sort of coming into this. So I hope you are enjoying this new book and new start and hope you're blessed.